Welcome. I hope everybody heard Garrett's cough right into the mic right at the very beginning to the Silicon Slub Show. It is Thursday. We have a lot to discuss today, and we have an incredible guest to do it with. Garrett, introduce our esteemed guest.
Michelle Quist, who is running for Attorney General with the United Utah Party, is our guest today. And I'm excited because Jeopardy question, what does an Attorney General do? I would bet a week's pay that most people couldn't answer what that is. So, Clint hates when I ask obvious questions. What does the Attorney General do?
I'm surprised you're not asking, what does an attorney do?
Oh.
Even more basic.
Just took the wind out of myself.
How are you, Michelle?
I'm good. Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, you can answer his question or not. I mean, I usually ignore him, but what does an Attorney General do?
I mean, the Attorney General is the top law enforcement and attorney in the state. She is, state executive, one of 5 in Utah. She is the leader of the Attorney General's office. She leads the office. The office is in charge, is the executive of the law firm of the state. She leads the state agencies. She represents the state agencies, the employees of the state, through the agencies, right? Mm-hmm. And she supervises the county district attorneys. She is in charge of legal opinions as they're requested by the state offices and agencies. Basically, the head honcho legal enforcement officer of the state. She's it. She's where the buck stops as far as the legal officer.
Yeah. Does that help, Garrett?
Well, yeah. But
gosh, dang it.
All the lawsuits flying around, like
when the state is sued, the Attorney General represents the state.
Okay.
Before the courts.
And when a state wants to sue Apple or TikTok,
the Attorney General operates as plaintiff.
And then
in the name of Utah.
Okay. And then if there's some criminal group operating in Utah and the state wants to mitigate that, the Attorney General investigates
and goes after.
Yeah. See, there's a lot more to it than just
operates. I mean, there's agencies within the Attorney General's office that investigates child crimes, internet crimes. There's a ton of task forces that work within the state, and those are all housed within the Attorney General's office.
Let me ask you this. Like, it seems like in the state of Utah, this office has been in some ways cursed. Like, we have had, prior to Reyes, I believe both had to resign in scandal, or maybe one even served jail time. No, they didn't. So, why is that?
The people, not the office. I just think we've been electing the wrong people, and I believe it's because politics have been getting in the way. Some legislators, some politicians have floated the idea that we need to appoint the Attorney General instead of elect the Attorney General to kind of correct that problem. I don't think that's a good correction. I think we need to get the politics out of the way. I think they've been distracted by national politics or partisan politics instead of lawyering. I'm trying to get lawyering back into the Attorney General's office. I mean the employees have always been lawyering, right? They've always been. We have great employees in the Attorney General's office. They've been busy doing their jobs. They just haven't been supported by the top leader. We've been missing leadership in the Attorney General's office in the top job. And I'm trying to get that leadership back into the top job. And I don't think a partisan as the Attorney General can be that leader, because they're too focused on national politics. They're too connected by purse strings to those national politics. And I just think it's too difficult. And so my point is elect a third party, because they don't have the purse strings. They don't have the partisan politics. There's no party boss. I just want to get that leader back to lawyering.
What do you think of this idea? Because I think I agree with you. And I was having this discussion, I can't remember where, and somebody almost convinced me that maybe the governor should appoint it. But why do you think like the governor shouldn't? It seems to me like we should try to have as many public offices held to a vote and accountable to voters as possible.
Right. It takes the choice away from Utahns. It's less democracy. No state in the nation has gone from elected attorney general to appointed attorney general. Some states in the nation have gone from appointed attorney general to elected attorney general, because obviously it's more democratic, right? It gives people more choice, but going the opposite direction gives people less choice, and it's less accountability. It doesn't make sense to me to take accountability away from people. We can elect, our votes are the accountability, right? And we've done that. We've unelected these people who have done a poor job. Obviously, the scandal is distracting, right? And it's been bad for the office, and it's been bad for the state of Utah to have this decade of poor management within the office. And so I do think we need reform. I do think we need to change it somehow. And that's why I've jumped into the race.
Because I know the previous before Reyes, like I said, had this scandal. Has Reyes himself? I know that he's not resigning because of anything, but I know that there was like things around like Tim Ballard and these various, like I'm not entirely sure what all of it is.
Right.
But what is your thought on our current Attorney General?
He's not running again. He didn't resign. He's not running again. I think he's just distracted. He's distracted from the job. He's distracted by politics. One example, he spent some time a few years ago running to Nevada to check out the election, cries of election misinformation in the Trump.
Like fraud, like
yes,
maybe.
Thank you.
Yeah, like maybe it hadn't. Maybe Trump actually won or something like
that.
Is that what it is?
Election fraud in Nevada. So he was so busy doing all these things. First of all, that has nothing to do with the Utah Attorney General's office. So he's been distracted by all these things. He's shooting hogs out of helicopters. He's running to.
What? That's cool.
Oh yeah. It is cool, but it has nothing to do with like Utah lawyering, right? When he started in the office, he made a promise that he would reform the e-discovery methods and the discovery methods in the office. And that was something that he was supposed to do. Discovery is a huge part of litigation in an attorney in a law firm. Mm-hmm. For those who aren't attorneys, discovery is the middle part, and I say middle, and really it is the part of a case where both parties can ask both sides for the files and decide whether the claims are have merit, and it has to be in an organized fashion in order to be efficient. And Sean Reyes made a promise that he would not reform, but he would fix the discovery methods that the Attorney General's office used, because it was not good. It was just backwards. he hasn't. A little while ago, the court, one of the courts in Utah, chastised the Attorney General's office because they had been asking, an opponent had asked them for discovery, and they said they didn't have any. And then a few years later, just recently now, they pulled out a zip drive, and they brought the zip drive, and they said, we found this zip drive in an IT guy's drawer. Here's our discovery. And I'm sorry, but law firms in the state of Utah are using AI and e-discovery in their discovery methods. Like for the Attorney General's office in Utah to pull out a zip drive and say, here's our discovery, Your Honor. The court absolutely had merit in chastising the Attorney General's office for pulling out a zip drive years after they were asked for discovery. And that's my point, is that Sean Reyes was off gallivanting on political causes instead of doing the work of the Attorney General's office that he was tasked to do, because he was distracted.
So, as you mentioned, like, he's not running against, so you're not actually running against him.
No.
You're running against, you're running against a lot of people, actually, because the Republican primary has not sorted itself out, right?
Right.
But I know, like, Derek Brown, I don't know anything. I've never seen any polls, but I imagine he's the leading candidate there.
He is.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts on, like, how he would be different? Are you saying, like, hey, because he's coming from the Republican Party and he's tied to the exact same thing, we might have a similar outcome as we've had over the past, as you mentioned, decade and stuff?
Derek Brown is a wonderful man. I think, because I think any Republican in that office would have the same ties to partisan politics that the Republicans have had in the past, because they are courting the national Republican of attorney generals, because they're accepting money from Republican associations that you don't know who those money are come from, but they have ties, because they are tied to the national, the partisan politics. They have the same distractions. If the governor's going to the border, the attorney general is going to go to the border, rather than just staying in the office of Utah, focusing on lawyering. For instance, attorney generals in charge of the cases that are in front of the Supreme Court. We've got redistricting coming out. That's very important to Silicon Slopes, especially. I mean, this is our congressional delegation. If the attorney general is, running around after the Republican causes in the nation, who's supervising the cases in the Utah Supreme Court that are important to the state? Who's leading the office if the attorney general is absent?
Why has it gotten so political? Like, the attorney general and our United States Attorney General's office seems like that's super political now. Why? Why has this become like a political role? And maybe it always has been. I mean, JFK appointed his brother as Attorney General, so I mean, I'm sure that there are some, like, you want it to be somewhat political, but JFK and RFK are good people.
I think the Hamilton play showed us that its politics has been around for
it's been forever.
It's been pretty political from very from early days. I think the Trump era started discourse that just really started us down a lane that it's going to be hard to turn around, and I believe that there are still a lot of moderates that are afraid to speak up, and I think they've perhaps even not given up, but maybe given up. I don't know. I did for a minute.
Really?
Sure. You just kind of lose hope, and you just get quiet, and you just go about your day, right? You think that it doesn't matter. You think that you hear the national politics, and you think that it doesn't matter because you get busy. You go to work, you come home, you're busy, you're tired, you have your family. you deal with the day to day of life. You have to get dinner on the table. I mean, I'm a single mom. I have 7 kids. And I work full time, and I got to come home and get dinner on the table and drive the activities. And there's a lot to do. And sometimes it doesn't make sense to worry about the national political scene, and especially if I don't think I can do anything about it. And then after 18 months of that, I realized I have to do something about it, because if I don't, someone else will, and I can't handle it anymore.
Have you always been an independent?
You mean politically?
Yeah.
I mean, I was Republican in the state for the past 15 years.
And then you switched to the United Utah Party?
I did after the Carroll trial. After
Tell us about that. I don't think I even know about that.
So, I mean, so former President Trump was, found liable for sexual assault by a jury of his peers.
E. Jean Carroll.
Yes.
Okay.
After the E. Jean Carroll trial.
Okay.
So after that, and when I saw that he was still the front runner, I just didn't want to be associated with the party when he was still the front runner. I didn't want to be associated with what was essentially, the judge said it was essentially rape.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, I can't, I don't understand why he's still the front runner. And so I switched parties. And he told me to. He said, all you moderates, we don't want you anymore, leave. It was the same as what Mitt Romney said. So I said, okay, well, you told me to leave, so I will.
You did it. A campaign for attorney general is a little bit different than a campaign for state legislator or senator, right? Like, the stump speeches are different. The promises are different. How have you structured your campaign? What works? What doesn't?
Well, it's a statewide campaign, so it's different in that way. And I've never run it, so I can't compare to. I've never run a Senate, so I can't compare to that. So far, the difference is, I don't have a primary, and so my runway is longer, and so I'm still gearing up. Like, my website's still under construction. I'm still getting a team together. I'm still fundraising. So that's been a challenge, right? And the third party thing is also a challenge, right? Like, this is it would be historic.
Yeah.
A win would be historic.
Yeah.
No third party has ever won statewide in Utah. But if this would be the time to do it, this office is ripe for change, and I think people want to see a change. But yeah, so I'm still gearing up. But come May, that would the 6 months. It's that's go time.
And do you think there will be certain messages that resonate, right? Obviously, third party, your background. How are you going to know that it's going well? Is it just going to be intuition? Are you going to look at data? Are you going to look at numbers?
Data and numbers, absolutely. I mean, you're in tech, right? It has to be data, numbers, and if people tend to stay in their bubbles, especially people active on X, formerly Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
People can't win that way. You have to use data to support things like campaigns.
Tell us about the United Utah Party.
So the United Utah Party is a moderate. I'm getting my. The United Utah Party is a moderate party that.
Did this come out of Bob Bennett?
Bob Bennett was one of their first candidates.
Okay.
And I don't think he started the party. I don't know who started the party. As I was searching around for...
It's relatively new, though. It was right around when Bob Bennett got ousted in a primary, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he was one of their first. Their platform, they have 5 E's, they like to say. And their first E is ethical government and economy, education, environment, and equality. But they like to say they don't. I mean, they don't require conformity, right? Like they're not going to kick members out, and they're not. It's just a much more fluid party, and it's small. Like there's only 3,000 members, but growing. Von Cook is running in the United Utah Party for the 4th district, congressional district. And Ladd Johnson is the party chair. And their convention's in April. So it's still, it's a political party. They still follow the same statutory guidelines. Growing, but
still relatively new.
Still relatively new.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, still like I want to say, like, was it Mike Lee who ousted Bob Bennett, and what was that? Is that 2010?
Yeah, that was. I had just moved here then.
Yeah.
But we had another candidate from the same party, and I think they kind of got their 2015, 2016 is when they spun it up, or at least started getting their candidates and things like that. So, but there's a spark there for sure. There's definitely a spark.
Because people are looking for something other than the extreme sides, and the parties have become so extreme, and people just, don't feel the extreme from what they're hearing on both sides. And whether the parties from 20 years ago weren't that, right? Like I've been Republican my whole life, but I don't identify with what I'm hearing from them anymore. And I just don't identify with that. And so I had to go looking for something else. And now, especially now that the party front runner is telling members to leave, they have to go looking for something else. I think I wrote an article a few years ago, women especially, Republican women, and I think it was maybe 2018, with the Republican women made a huge difference in the election year in how they voted, both for both sides. And they're searching for something else because they're not identifying with the Republican Party now, especially with Trump and his actions. So they're going to searching for something else too.
Yeah, and like on the national stage, like your third party person is Robert Kennedy Jr. Right? And so like that's kind of which probably affects Biden more than Trump would be my guess, because he kind of comes from, I mean, he's a Kennedy.
And they're good people, right?
They're great people. I actually really think that his dad was awesome. So we're kind of in an interesting spot nationally when you look at like Trump, Biden, and then RFK Jr. would be the race. Have we ever seen anybody like Donald Trump that has such a hold on a party for so long?
Oh,
like
no.
This is the third time in a row.
I know
that he's won this nomination, and I think he would just, if he could, he'd win it every time.
He'd dictate that he would win it every time. Absolutely.
Have we ever seen anybody like this? Like, what is your experience of him? Like, how do you think all of this ends? And by the way, like, the Democrats are doing themselves no favors with like this Joe Biden guy and pretending like, he's okay.
Yeah. I don't. But that's why both sides are. That's why both sides are struggling, to attract and identify with voters, and voters are just going to give up.
What I find fascinating, and tell me what you think of this, I don't think Mitt Romney would have won re-election. Would you ever have thought in a million years that Mitt Romney couldn't win an election in Utah?
No, and I'm not sure I agree. He wouldn't have gotten through convention.
Well, he didn't get through convention last time.
Didn't he get second?
He got second. Yeah, but that Kennedy guy won. And again, another
Right.
Kennedy.
You love you some Kennedys.
I actually don't really care, but
yeah.
You think he would, like, I don't think he would have won, because I think I think Trump is more popular in Utah than Mitt.
Yeah.
Didn't he just get like 53% at
Trump?
Yeah, at caucus night. or 58%. Like, it wasn't huge.
We're certainly
versus
not
Haley.
an enormous Trump state,
Right.
right? For
And that was
particularly for Republicans.
And the people who went to caucus were the far right. So then you'd have the people who actually voted would be not that group.
But he still wins. Like, this was like, remember the argument in 2016? It was like, Evan McMullin could win Utah. I don't think so.
Not even close.
I don't think he can win Utah.
But they manufactured caucus night. Like, they made it so that they instead of an election, they made it so that the presidential would be on caucus night, where they knew only a few people would show up and only the diehards.
Yeah.
And only, moms were at home.
I don't love caucuses. I agree with you on that. In fact, I think they should be abolished in all things. But you say that, and then Barack Obama wouldn't be president because Hillary Clinton dominated primaries in big states. And people forget she actually got more votes than he did in 2008. And he won because he picked up a ton of delegates in the caucus system. And so it kind of is an interesting historical, perspective. Like, caucuses have really meant something in the past.
Right.
But I don't love them. Like, it's like 2 hours, and you got, like you said, like, what if you have something to do that night, or your kid's sick, or a million different things?
Does ours work? Do ours work the same as other states?
I have no idea.
Me neither.
I have no idea.
Ours seems.
They all seem like they're a mess. If I'm being honest, it all
Yeah.
seems like super crazy. Like going into like where they hold AA meetings and people are talking about these candidates, and you're trying to convince the other people in the room. It's like the weird.
Yeah.
I've never been to one in my life.
I got yelled at my first one.
Oh,
A
really?
neighbor called me, "You young buck."
Called you a young buck.
Yeah, I was actually stumping for Mike Lee.
Oh.
Really?
Yeah, I was trying to become a delegate for Mike Lee instead of Bob Bennett. And you young buck, get out of here. He didn't say get out of here, but he said, "You young buck."
What do you think of Lee?
I think he's he was a law school classmate.
Oh, he was?
Well, he was a third year when I was a first year. I think he's lost his way. I think he's got distracted with the politics of it.
Yeah. Sorry to ask you all these like controversial
No, it's good.
questions.
I have a non-controversial one. With, let's say, Delaware being the easiest state to be an attorney general in, or Vermont or New Hampshire, some small, inconsequential state. California maybe being the hardest, or Texas.
I actually think Delaware would be the hardest.
I'm not sure their size would make them easy or hard.
Delaware with all the corporations in there is probably actually the
Absolutely.
hardest.
Yeah.
All right, let's switch it to Vermont. But they don't have a lot of the same issues as like California, right? Where does Utah rank? Well, I guess you already answered. You don't think it matters,
Yeah.
the difficulty level? Because I always associate politics as being infinitely more tricky in California, where there's 34 million people and a billion more moving parts.
But they're also like Utah in that it's basically a single party state.
Entirely, yeah.
So they have less coalition building, less interests at play.
Yeah. But wouldn't the staff of the Attorney General of California be 50x than Utah, right? Like, wouldn't it be its own bureaucracy in and of itself because of all the suing and countersuing and all of that?
Yeah.
How big is the Attorney General's office here as far as like?
There are
personnel?
over 250 attorneys.
Wow, a lot.
Lots more staff.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
You do not want to be in that vortex, right? It's never good.
I do want to be.
Well,
in
not-
it.
Yeah, what do you
No.
mean by that?
If the Attorney General's
She's
office,
running for Attorney General.
if the Attorney General's office is asking you questions, it's not good, right?
You want to be careful in how you answer those questions.
Yeah. It's 250 lawyers.
Yeah, it's the attorney. Like, are you learning what an attorney general is for the first time this morning?
No, and I guarantee I would dominate it on Jeopardy. It would actually be an interesting documentary of what an Attorney General's office does.
Have you seen Sharknado? They should do that for the Attorney General.
Yeah, a whole week on attorney generals. That'd be sweet,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
So how do you think this plays out? Where do you think the future of Utah is? I think you are correct in saying, like, hey, there's never been a better time for a third party to do well in the state of Utah. You mentioned Trump only getting 53, 54% at a caucus, right? And
Yeah.
he doesn't do well here.
Don't hold me to those. It might
No,
have
no,
been
no.
58.
He doesn't do well here in comparison to the blowouts everywhere else. He still wins. He still gets a majority. Still, like, all of that type of stuff. But it's not as dominant as, like, the 40, 50-point blowouts for sure.
Yeah.
And so, and we did elect Mitt Romney, and he did, randomly, he accepted Trump's endorsement and things. But what do you think the future of Utah is? And do you think this election might be a signal towards its future?
I hope it is. You know, I think that there's opportunity there for people to stand up and say we're ready. You know, we're ready for change. It's time for change. You know, the January 6th, we don't want that to happen again.
We're in for something weird, Michelle.
I know.
Regardless of who wins, doesn't it feel like we're in for a crazy event? It doesn't matter which of these candidates wins. We are at this point in our country where I mean, I can't, certainly in my lifetime, it's never been this divided. But if you even look historical, I mean, we're like Civil War. We were more divided for sure, but like it's hard to count or look at different instances where we would have been more divided than we are now.
Yeah, but I think it's time for our leaders to be better, right? Like we need to, and whether that means that the voters need to elect better leaders, or our leaders need to be more accountable or responsible in what's about to happen or what's going to happen, and I don't know, put their foot down or take one for the team, whether, you know,
we need to disagree better.
Do the right thing. You know, do the right thing, whether it means your political career is on the line or not. Do the right thing. I've always opened my mouth whether and not considered what it means for, you know, my career or my, you know, before I open my mouth.
Sure.
And I just say things. And then, like, for instance, I'll give you a lawyer, not a political example. When I graduated almost 24 years ago, and I started my career at Milbank in New York City. It's a Wall Street law firm. And I was there for 3 years and got married in New York City and pregnant quickly thereafter, and started experiencing pregnancy discrimination. Didn't realize what was happening, and took some time off, had the baby, came back to the firm, still not getting work. Went into my office mate's office, and I was like, I think they're not giving me work because I was pregnant. And she's like, yeah. And it was just like, so I just didn't understand what was happening, you know. So I left, right? Like, they were making the choice for me, and I left, and I took time off in my career. But American Lawyer was doing a trade journal, was doing an article on women in other firms breaking the glass ceiling. And somebody gave them the experience that I had had as kind of the negative example. And they're like, oh, will you be in this, I'm taking a great picture with you and your baby, and will you give us your example? I was like, oh yeah, sure, I'll totally do it. And they do, they put in the article, and they just beautiful picture. And at the end of it, she's like, I'm thank you so much. I'm so surprised that you did this. And she walks out, and I'm like, well, why? And my friend's like, because you'll never get a job in New York again. And I was like, what?
Wow.
So I say these, and that's kind of like what I've done over the past 5, 6, 7 years in the Tribune. I've written these articles about the legislature and politics and women in law. And, you know, I've gotten these comments about, oh, we're so tired of Michelle talking about women. We're so tired of Michelle talking about, you know, the legislature. We're so tired of Michelle talking.
Yeah.
And I want to see leadership in Utah start doing the right thing, whether it means that there's going to be a consequence or not, because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. How long did you write for the Tribune? Or maybe you still are?
I'm not. I'm a candidate, so no longer writing for the Tribune. I started as an editorial writer for the Tribune in 2016, and then did not write, and then stopped writing editorials maybe in 2018, but continued the column until this year.
I see.
Or maybe last year.
I have a bit of a history at the Tribune. I was on the kind of inaugural board of the nonprofit. Yeah. And I actually bumped into Paul at a jazz game, I think the day after he announced that he was leaving. Mm-hmm. What do you think of the future of the Tribune? That's a hard, moving that to a nonprofit and losing, I mean, I'm not saying he's going to stop, the family's going to stop donating, but by far the biggest donor to the Tribune was the Huntsman family.
Yeah.
How did they survive?
It'll be interesting to see. Hopefully they started, the ball rolling. And, I mean, I'm not privy to
Sure.
the finances.
Me neither. Not anymore. I used to be.
Yeah.
As a board member.
Those are some heady days there.
It's important to have an independent voice. It's important to have multiple voices. You know, it's important for everyone to get media news from multiple sources. You know?
Yeah. So, how do you think this shakes out? What do you think your chances are in all reality?
I think, like I said, it would be historic.
Yeah.
You know, third parties
Have we ever had a woman attorney general?
We have Jan Garrett.
Okay.
She recently passed.
Okay.
People laud her as one of the best because honestly, I think she just got down to lawyering.
Yeah.
Like I said, she's not distracted by politics. But a third party win in the state would be a historic win. And that's, what I'm asking the people of Utah to get behind. I'm going for it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I respect anybody who puts himself out there like that and just raises their hand, and it's incredible. Best of luck. How do people learn more about you and the United Utah Party and how to get engaged in politics?
Yeah.
Did I say that in a way where we won't legally get in trouble?
I don't know. There's 250 of them, though.
Sean, don't come after us for me asking that question.
As soon as we end here, things are going to get bad.
My website's michelleforutah.com. It will be better.
Oh,
it's a placeholder right now. But my social links are on the bottom. And my Instagram and Facebook are active.
Very cool.
Twitter's always active.
Yeah. You're a great follow on Twitter.
Thanks.
Yeah, I like following you on Twitter. Thank you so much for coming in.
Of course.
Seriously.
Thanks.
What
Thanks
an
for
honor to
having
have
me.
you. Who do we have on Monday, Garrett?
We have Kyle Deaver, president of Performance Windows.
Oh, very cool.
It'll be fun.
Okay, everybody have a great weekend. We will see you Monday.